Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today, as part of our series on the attack on Pearl Harbor, we have a video about 3 sailors who were trapped on the Battleship West Virginia after she sank on December 7, 1941. The space they were trapped in was a storeroom at the bottom of the ship called A-111. We're filming this video in a similar space on Battleship New Jersey. So we apologize for the sound and the lighting. That's just what you get when you're filming in a steel box. West Virginia was the most modern of the American battleships during the attack on Pearl Harbor. She had been commissioned shortly after the Washington Naval Treaty in 1922 and was basically a World War I era design. Because she was the most modern ship in the fleet, she had not been modernized like some of the other battleships. So as equipment had been added, it simply lowered her center of buoyancy. This meant that her original torpedo defense system ended up being far more submerged than her designers had planned. West Virginia was arguably the most damaged of the Pearl Harbor battleships. She took the most hits. 7 torpedoes, which hit mostly along the edge between her armor belt and her excellent torpedo defense system. Had those torpedoes hit lower, the torpedo defense system would have been able to bend and absorb the explosions, but because it hit on the seam with the rigid belt, it opened up wide gashes in her hull and flooded vast areas on the ship. In addition to the 7 torpedoes, she was also hit by 3 bombs and was in danger of capsizing. Thankfully, a mid-level officer was able to counterflood and make sure she sank on an even keel, which left her more or less salvageable. The ship took so much damage during the attack that even her commanding officer was killed in action. She would eventually be raised and returned to the fight. And she would get her revenge when at the Battle of Saratoga Strait, she got to slug it out with Japanese battleships. Many of the Pearl Harbor battleships, when they sunk, had crew trapped below decks. That's the story we're going to talk about today. It's pretty famous how when the Battleship Oklahoma rolled over and sank, people could hear her crew hitting on the hull with wrenches. And some of those men, they were able to use cutting torches and open up the hull and rescue them. Some of them, they were not able to. You can see this depicted in the movie Pearl Harbor. That also happened on the Battleship West Virginia, but West Virginia was more modern than Oklahoma and had a far better torpedo defense system. Her shell plating covered up another 4 layers of tanks and void spaces to protect against torpedoes, which meant that anybody trying to cut in would have to cut through 5 layers of steel, some of which held fuel, and obviously cutting with a torch through steel into a space that's filled with fuel is not a good idea. And so, the men trapped in West Virginia had to wait to slowly drown, suffocate, starve. Meanwhile, their surviving shipmates were still assigned to the sunken Battleship West Virginia. The West Virginia's crew continued to have to stand watch guarding the wreck of the ship, which meant for the days it took for their crew members to succumb, they heard their shipmates tapping on the hull with wrenches, and they knew they couldn't do anything to get to them. It would be nearly 2 years before West Virginia was raised, so damaged was she that she was a low priority. Our story today is about 3 sailors in a storeroom, much like this one. I'm going to read their names here. Louis Buddy Costin was 21 years old. Clifford Olds was just 20. And Ronald Endicott was 18. Their hometown newspapers reported on December 17th that they had been killed in action in the Pacific. Didn't mention the Battleship West Virginia, didn't mention the attack on Pearl Harbor, didn't have to. But the surprising fact was they were still alive on December 17th. Years after the attack on Pearl Harbor, when salvagers made it down to the space that they had been in, they found a calendar on the wall with 16 red grease pencil X marks over days from December 7th all the way up until December 23rd. Here is a drawing of the booklet of general plans for West Virginia to show you the space they were in. Like I said, it's pretty similar to this one. Being on a longer Iowa-class battleship, our space here is about 24 feet long. On West Virginia, the storeroom was about 20 feet long. And here, space encompasses the entire internal width of the hull, pretty far forward. On West Virginia, it would have probably been about half of this width. The storeroom had ship service supplies in it. Also, apparently had some food. And there were some hatches into the double bottom, which had either fresh water as ballast or feed water in it. And so they were able to open those hatches to sustain themselves. The space was sealed by a watertight trunk like this one. In the trunk, there's access to other spaces on this level. There's a ladder leading up. When the ship went to general quarters, this probably wasn't a battle station for these men. They just happened to be down here working at the time. But they couldn't make it to their general quarter stations. As the ship started to flood, people closed all the hatches. As the ship flooded around them, water pressure on the hatch overhead would have prevented them from being able to lift it. And so they were stuck in here, several layers of steel tanks on each side of them. Like I said earlier, they had some ship service parts and some rations down there, so they had some food. It was probably had some sort of desk, potentially, if it had a calendar in it, and grease pencils so that they were able to account for supplies they had. They had the drinking water in the hatch, and they had some emergency lights and even some spare batteries. When the space was opened up, they found a bunch of spent batteries. They had nothing but flashlight power. When the ship sunk, she lost electrical power, so the whole space went dark. And some who spent 16 days in a steel box, no air conditioning, no bathroom, little food, and very little light. Eventually, they ran out of air and suffocated. Sometimes battleships are just a little bit too survivable. Thanks for watching today. There are fewer and fewer Pearl Harbor survivors each year. If you know the story of a Pearl Harbor survivor, leave it in the comment section down below. We'd love to hear it. We're going to continue to put out content on the attack on Pearl Harbor all week. So remember to like, share, and subscribe so you see new videos that we put out. And if you like the work that the museum and the channel is doing, please check the description below for a link to our GoFundMe campaign. Anything you're able to donate helps us continue to make these videos. We do also receive operating support from the New Jersey Department of State. Thanks for watching.